Hey, everybody. We need to discuss World War III, which is not happening, but there's a lot of national security stuff going on. And that is worth a discussion with our friend Stephen Yates, who is of the wonderful Heritage Foundation and formerly a senior national security advisor to a vice president, and speaks Chinese, which I always think is so Mandarin, which I always think is very impressive to tell everybody. And I've asked him to take me out with him to a Chinese restaurant sometime so I can really check this stuff out. But we'll get there at some point. Let's start with this. I have never seen so many people on our side, the right, broadly speaking, however one even really defines that, so just, I guess, unrepentant about being so wrong on a national security thing so quickly as these airstrikes will lead to World War III. Like, what happens now? Where do they go with that?
Well, partially to me, I think this is evidence that TDS comes in multiple forms. And President Trump is doing things at a pace and a scope and a quantity that has never been done before. And I think even people on our side can fall into the trap of trying to make protracted judgments based on instant analysis. And the pace of things, the change, all of it is so fast that a lot of people are going to be wrong some of the time. And I just think people on our side aren't used to that. And it's much more of a severe syndrome on the other side. But I think the first rule of living in Trump's world is it's going to get shaken 4 or 5 times a day. Don't panic. Don't assume the first result is the end result, and let him cook for a little bit before you sort of get a sense of the direction. And I think ultimately that's what it is. He is a directional leader who distracts people with things that happen along the way. And they don't even realize they've moved. I mean, maybe I'm right, maybe I'm wrong, but when I look at even what we're dealing with some of the zigs and zags on Israel and Iran right now, directionally, this is in miraculously a positive direction based on what the history of this has been. And does it mean it's over? No, nothing is over until we say it's over. so,
Yeah.
but this is, when you look at the negotiations on trade, you look at the negotiations on Russia and Ukraine, these things take a lot of time, but he's not even 6 months in. And directionally, we've done some things that are far, far better than they were in the Biden years. But that, I think, is what messes with people. But I've been disappointed with a lot of people that I know are friends.
Mm.
But there's no worse disappointment than when you work for somebody that you like, and then they do something you didn't agree with, and you were right and they were wrong, and you feel bad all the way around. Hey, that's my life.
Yeah. I've got to say, I think that the trends right now in the Middle East are more positive than I can ever remember them being, certainly in my adult
Right.
lifetime, right? In the post 9/11 GWAT era, because even on things like when people say, okay, well, what about the proxies and the terrorists? I'm like, look, first of all, we're always at risk from some, if somebody wants to infiltrate a four-man terror cell, unfortunately, across our southern border over the last 4 years, uh, you know, that's a risk, right? That's a thing that they can do, but that will just kill a bunch of innocent people, which is horrible, but it's not going to change the military calculus at all of what's going on with the Israelis in the Middle East, right? So that doesn't, but also on top of that, Hamas and Hezbollah are in the worst position they've been, which are the primary proxies I think that we're usually concerned about in the Middle East when we talk about Iran. They're in the worst position they've been in since I can remember. I mean, the pay people, things have gone so well with the airstrikes, Steve, that the pager operation against Hezbollah, which is the most incredible intelligence operation I can think of, no one even seems to remember that
Completely
these
agree.
days. Yeah.
Completely agree. I know. And so I think it partially comes down to people who have lived honestly, and there are some who don't live honestly in the national security world, know that we don't ever get the luxury of zero risk. And there's always, in several different places, terrible things that could happen in an instant, and we work against, we hope against. It's just sort of a management process. But if you look at how some people say, well, but Iran could strike back in our homeland. Yeah, well, we always have to watch out for things like that. But the risk in that was pretty severe without Israel having done anything against Iran, without the U.S. having done anything against Iran. And that's courtesy of the Biden years of letting a whole host of unknown people into our country. But the best way to mitigate those things is sort of what the Israelis have done, and what I think a broader coalition of people need to do is one by one, you lessen the capabilities of the bad actors. You get the Chinas and the Russians to think maybe they want to back off, and maybe they're not all in for their Iranian pals. The Iranian pals aren't able to fuel those subordinates, and you have a demonstration effect by the president being decisive. I always thought it was a little bit ridiculous for people to say, oh, Donald Trump is going to get us into World War III or some kind of protracted commitment. I mean, having B-2s fly over and shake the earth is profoundly different than sending ground forces anywhere. And so, if anything, and also I just loved the idea of how many people are soul hurt by not being told in advance this was happening. And I thought Scott Jennings actually had it perfectly summed up. The way you guard against leak is you don't talk to leakers. And so you can sort of tell where the leaks were coming from based on who the president and his top team didn't talk to.
You'll appreciate before, and I mean 2 hours before the Israeli strikes kicked off. I was with the president and then right next to the Oval with the whole, your old office. I mean, the NSC and talking to all those different folks. And it was funny because everything was very, we were off the record, but I mean, we're talking about all kinds of national security stuff. And everything was pretty, oh yeah, we can talk about this. I had an not on the record content, but on the record meeting with Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, and all these different folks that I talked to just in general. The second, remember, hours before the Israeli strike, if I even mentioned the word Iran, it was, it was all of a sudden everyone kind of just like got really, they're like, oh, but, I even had one, I won't say who it was. I had one person who I just said, what's the temperature like with Iran right now? Because I'm getting a sense that things might be, there's some chatter of things heating up, whatever. And it was, well, I can't separate the classified from the unclassified, so I can't make further comment. I remember in my head just
that's
thinking,
a tell.
I remember in my head thinking, okay, so we're going in. Like, this is happening.
Yeah.
So, yeah. No surprise there.
No,
but,
it is remarkable.
It's everyone's very quiet about it, for sure. So it's gone much, I will say this, it's gone better even than I had anticipated in terms of the retaliatory response from Iran. The fact that Tehran, we're told, and I believe it, told us that they were going to fire missiles at our base in this show of force thing. Clearly they can't do any military to military damage to us. Their only option is terrorism. And look, I think people need to remember also October 7th, what Hamas did in Israel was it was the Israeli 9/11. That was the let's just go out and kill as many civilians as possible approach to things. And I think people can look back historically, or will look back historically, and think that was maybe the biggest strategic miscalculation that Hamas has ever made, among many, right? I mean, among a lot of errors and blunders. But I think they completely missed it. They don't understand. You do something like that, and the first world armies of civilization, they take the gloves off.
Well, I agree with that. I also think it exposed more because we had rent-a-mobs and agitators for years doing destructive things in the United States. And as long as it was domestic politics, it kind of hid who was up to what. But after October 7th, the flash mobs were immediately holding up Hamas and Palestinian flags and things like that. It made very, very clear, I think, to a lot of sane America that, holy crap, this is something different. This is not organic. This is not American.
I mean, also, remember, there were people, they were still burying the dead in Israel. I mean, women and children and the elderly, burying the dead. And you had people in this country calling for a ceasefire. A ceasefire before the Israelis had even been able to fire a shot in response. That is the most disingenuous. I mean, this is like if a guy ran into a bar, punched the first person in the face he saw, and then when the guy went to hit him back, he goes, hold on a second, ceasefire.
Hey.
No, that's not how this works.
It's peace and love, brother. Come on.
Yeah. I mean, the ceasefire talk was just, but I'm actually, in a sense, I think it was good that they did that because it showed the same people saying ceasefire are the same people who have been saying there's a genocide in Gaza as things move along, are the same people who are saying that we're violating international norms by striking Iran. They really actually just root for the bad guys. I mean, they're really actually just on
It was very
team
clarifying.
terrorists.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, very, very clarifying. The other thing was after October 7th, somewhere along the lines, there was some back and forth. Of course, the Israelis have done some incredible things by way of human intelligence, embedding themselves into their enemy in ways that the entire world ought to learn.
Can I just jump in really quickly with this, because you had a TS and secret squirrel clearance. I had a TS secret squirrel clearance. We saw some interesting stuff back in the day. I've never seen anything like what the Israelis pulled off with Hezbollah. Obviously, I don't think anyone's seen that, but also it's like they mapped out. I mean, Stephen, they did missile strikes on nuclear scientists at home in apartment buildings and only killed the scientists. I mean, this is like, it's like they had the whole playbook of how they were going to take out all the guys they wanted to take out.
Well, I think they literally did have the playbook, and they had people that were trusted and at the side of some pretty key leaders. So they ended up with the intelligence, the necessary knowledge, but then the precision and the discipline to deliver on what they aim to do. I mean, the visuals of seeing a hole in the side of a condo building that only fried the unit the bad guy was in. That is otherworldly. That is the stuff of movies that we wouldn't believe if we read the script. And so it was really, really amazing. Plus, they had an exchange of missiles. So Iran launched some missiles in the direction of Israel like a year ago or something like that. And the Israelis were able to learn from that when they retaliated the state of Iran's air defenses. Iran had bought a lot of air defense capabilities from several different sources, Chinese, the Russians, others. And on paper, it could have been scary. We had to have some uncertainty. So did the Israelis. But I think the Israelis learned a lot more than the average bear about the vulnerability that Tehran and other places had when they saw their missile counterstrikes succeed. And that led them to know they could conduct deeper operations. So they had the playbook, they had some technical tests, but then they also had the gumption to give it a go, and they had their reasons for it. Now, we also have people, you talked about some people on our side that got spun up in different ways. You'll talk about, the Israelis leading us in a direction or two, and us, doing these things for Israel. I don't know. I'm old enough to remember 444 days, and I'm old enough to remember Marine barracks and other kinds of things getting blown up. There is, and I also, we can be for or against the Iraq War. I certainly have a lot of questions and criticisms of how things were conducted after major military operations were done. At the initial phase, lots and lots of criticisms and questions. But no matter what, there's a lot of Iranian ordnance that killed Americans during that war. There's any number of reasons why a decisive action would be justified just on American interests. And again, I similarly to a lot of these people, I don't want a protracted war, but this was striking at distance and with stealth. And I think should shiver the timbers of Russia and China.
Yeah, we're remarkably successful. Let's come back and actually talk next steps here in a second. But our sponsor here is Birch Gold. And here's the good news. Trump's in charge of the economy. Things are going well. Here's the bad news. The debt is $37 trillion now. Only way through this is going to be some degree of money printing. It's just a question of how much. And that's where inflation continues to chip away at your savings. And given the possibility, look, people are talking about World War III. It didn't happen, but things can change in an instant. Preparation with gold just makes sense. Diversifying into gold is something you should consider, and that's where Birch Gold Group comes in. They've helped tens of thousands of people, for example, convert an existing IRA or 401k into an IRA in physical gold. Gold is a way, historically and certainly today, to hedge against inflation and serious economic instability. Learn how you can own physical gold in a tax-sheltered account by texting my name, B-U-C-K, Buck, to this number. Text 989898 with Buck. Text Birch Gold at 989898 BUCK. Write that in. Birch Gold will send you a free, no obligation info kit. Again, text my name, Buck, to the number 989898 today. Birch Gold help you own physical gold or transition an existing IRA or 401k into a gold IRA or 401k. All right, so now Trump doesn't really need to hear the lectures from the chattering class over like no nation building. I think he's pretty clear on that, and I also think he's a little like the dad who's been paying all the bills, who now has people chirping at him about like how to he's got it, he's figured this out.
That's a good analogy.
What do you think is next here for if things go the way that we would like them to? Because I'm always very I wouldn't say, I don't know if cynical is the word, but I just feel like, look, Assad had suicide bombers infiltrating pretty much his inner circle in like 2012, and it looked like they were going to get him, and he lasted another decade and change, right? Under tremendous pressure, and managed to just sort of slither out and last. And what is he now? He's living in Russia, right? I'm not as convinced as some others that this is the death knell of the Ayatollahs at all. But so then, if that is the case, what's the best realistic option for what happens in Iran without us pushing regime change?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would confess over the arc of my life, I've been disillusioned about the nature of authoritarian and brutal regimes. They have a stickiness that is very, very disappointing.
Very good at staying in power. That's like the main thing they want to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And willing to do anything. And so they have escalatory dominance over anyone who wants to challenge them in many, many cases. The one that seared in my mind was the absolute universe of intelligence services in the U.S. and the entire world saying that the North Korean regime was on its deathbed in the 90s. Yeah. And it was overwhelming evidence. And
there was mass starvation, right? So you can look at this and be like, there's no way that people. It's hard for starving people to overthrow a huge military apparatus.
Yeah. And then you think of, the regimes now have tools that the people back then could only imagine. And so, I would love it if the Iran pre-revolution had a second go of things. That would be a beautiful thing to witness. It would be great if the history of the Persian Empire could kind of give some of those good civilizational qualities back to this war-torn part of this planet. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that. And I think that what President Trump has been doing, he's hit a lot of major reset buttons. But one of the major reset buttons is a true sense of realism in foreign policy. And that really focuses less on the nature of the state and more on containing the malign influences and seeing if you can negotiate a more stable balance point for our interactions with different countries. And that's uncomfortable for a lot of people that live in the world of black and white, complete 100% right or wrong, no gray, no middle, which is not my life, whether it's in dealing with the family that I love, or dealing with friends or other experiences. The real world is not all or nothing. And it's not that here either. And so I think what President Trump has now, you've got the Abraham Accords countries that probably aren't 100% happy with the way things have played out. Israel probably pretty happy. But some of the Arab allies, maybe mixed feelings, but on balance, they didn't want Iran to have a nuclear program either. But you have tools to manage risk better going forward and a lot of motivation to do it. Trump pushes prosperity, and people might downplay that, but it is a useful and good tool. It doesn't work all the time perfectly. I think U.S.-China relations are the best counterexample to prosperity doctrine doesn't solve all your national security woes, and you have to watch out. But it's a lot safer set of options than having a theocratic totalitarian regime with a bunch of violent terrorist proxies. So we're in a different set of tools. He's also really focused on arming and enabling independent capabilities among our allies so that they can, over time, take a lead. With this stupid talk of closing the Straits of Hormuz, that shivered the timbers of the Chinese. So Iran,
they just want the oil to keep flowing. They're not gonna say, yeah, you know what, guys, stop selling us your oil. That's not gonna help.
So here's a big country that wants to be your friend, and you're peeing in their Cheerios. Come on, you
Yeah.
can't do this.
Yeah. That sounds
And
even
so
better in the original Chinese, you know, that's
the classical Chinese, modern
classical
Chinese is
Chinese.
a
Sorry.
little coarse.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Yeah, it's more
yeah.
poetic in the old language.
I mean, look, maybe we have to do a follow up to this, Steve, when we say, oh my gosh, you know, who knew that Iran had that ace up their sleeve? I think the chance of that is like less than 1%. So far to me, it seems like a remarkable success where we are. But we'll do a follow up, though. This was our Middle East Yates deep dive. We'll do a East Asia deep dive next time we talk Stephen Yates over at the Heritage Foundation. Stephen, always appreciate you, man. Thank you so much.
Take good care. Thank you, Buck.